Thanks. Brilliant to hear you today, Stefan. It's fantastic. I think it was 20 years ago, people like Gary Hamill and Rosabeth Moss-Kanter were looking at partnerships and alliances and collaboration. I've worked in the movie and TV industry for 20 years in this sort of area. The research, all the academic research shows the reason why partnerships and open relationships fail, it's not to do with technology, it's to do with people. And it's the people failures. And I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that, because the reason why contracts fail is not because of commerce or technology, it's because there's often people conflicts between a partner and a principal.
The problem is if you get me started on this one, you will not get any break. But I fully agree, it's all about people. I mean, my mantra, so to speak, is people first, process next, then ideas. And to give you a short answer to your question, shoot me an email and I can get you some more stuff on that. But too often I see companies focus way too much on developing idea pools, project pools. Okay, we need more ideas, and how can we get these ideas? And the thing is, I mean, if a company is having difficulties finding good ideas, they're not doing their job good enough. Corporate innovation is not good. Ideas is never ever going to be the problem. You have plenty of ideas internally if you look the right way, or if you have to, you can go externally as well. Plenty of ideas. So forget about that. But what's more important is that you need to find the right people and put them at the right situation for the right idea. And you need to understand that when it comes to innovation, you usually go in three phases. It's discovery, incubation, and acceleration. And you need different types of people for the different types of stages here. And what I really would suggest companies to do, and also your organization, would be to go in and say that, hey, you're developing idea and project pools, but how about developing people pools as well? People pools in which you can divide them into these three categories. You know that, okay, you need someone who's very good at the very early stages of technology, get brainy ideas, and they do this. And what I might see too much, I'm not sure because I'm not too deep into it in universities, when a professor gets an idea at this stage, it's kind of expected that if it has to be commercialized, the professor needs to be in the role all the way through. No way. Put that person free, let him contribute the way it's needed in order to drive that project forward, and let him focus on something new. And then the incubation guy will take over. And when that happens, hey, now we incubate this, and now it's a pretty good business. But now we need to accelerate and make this a multi-billion-dollar business. You need the accelerator. That's how you need to approach it. And in order to do so, I would suggest them start building the people pools as well. One more question? Yeah.
Just to follow up on your question, your point about people pools. On one of your slides, you had a list of characteristics or attributes. They included entrepreneurial skills, networking talent, communication skills, strategic influencing, and so on. Do you have any observations about how you embed those types of skill-building processes within the student experience so that students come out with the skills that they can contribute to incubation, ideation, acceleration, and so on? Because very often, if you look at what a lot of employers talk about when they look at students and they talk about employability skills, a lot of what they really talk about are pretty basic functional skills, whereas I would argue that what universities offer are a set of high-level attributes and capabilities that can really help in terms of economic development and incubating new ideas and exchanging knowledge. So how do you go about ensuring that these capabilities are in the student experience?
I think Else actually pointed out that one, because you said something about that the education is not really embedded, it's not good enough throughout the entire education system, whether you start in grade schools and all the way up. You need to improve the training on how to do this one. And if I were to go and look at the training here, I would see how I can do as much learning by doing, action learning as possible. That's why I really like business plan competition when you get to a corporate level, because if you can set up business plan competition which they work on real projects and get the mentoring and the coaching and the education as they do this, they'll get into practical situations which they say, hey, this is what I need to know more about, and I need to know more about this one in order to drive my project further. It kind of sticks much better. So you can do kind of learning by doing education. I think that would be the best way of doing it. And then there are different ways of doing this, but I think mentoring, coaching, but again, centered around a real project, I think is going to learn the most, bring the best learning out of it. Okay, a break now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we're about to get started. So can we just, yeah. Okay. But I really appreciate how we already got some good questions from you doing our talks here. But before we get into about an hour of discussion here, see how it takes us and how much energy we have 3 questions. I'm just going to show the 3 questions real quick, and then we'll kind of take them one by one. And I actually spoke with these guys up here, and they're okay, it's not just about them. Too often on panels, you see big egos, and these big egos on the speakers, like, hey, me, I have something to say. But today we try to do it more differently. These guys have some golden nuggets to share with you, but it's also about you guys. So I really want you to get engaged as well. The question 1 we're going to look at is this one, and the other one, methods and tools to facilitate collaboration and co-creation, especially online portals. But what else can we actually do here? And what about open innovation models that offer new opportunities to stimulating student entrepreneurship activities? Those are the 3 topics we're going to cover, and we can go around this and a bit away from these, but we'll try to keep these like the steering guidelines, okay? But just before we get started, starting over on this side, and just by one word, any of you who dares, who actually want to, shout out, based on the talks we gave you here, in just one word, what's your reflection? Anything? Anyone wants to start? What is, just in one word, what is your reflection now, your key takeaway? Yeah. Frustration, okay. I can imagine it relates to there's lots of new things, and how do you actually deal with this, or?
Academic and someone who likes to innovate and has ideas, find the system, the university system, whatever you call it, very frustrating. So lack of knowledge, lack of a proper incentive system or appropriation of what you're doing or who's going to get the credit creates problem for why should I become innovative in the first place.
Okay, I'm just a quick one, but I really like, why should I become innovative in the first place? Oops, that's a bad question to ask. I mean, in terms of creating the university ecosystem, but if your employees start asking questions like that, it's an uphill battle. I understand your frustration. Are there just one-word reflections? Yeah? Literacies. Say what?
Literacies.
Now I'm...
literacies.
What is that, Brian?
So, for instance...
I'm not a native user.
Being literate in certain things, and so one of them is digital literacies, for instance, which we find is a huge barrier in academic. And
okay, what is the word in another? It's not even in my English vocabulary.
Literacies. Yeah.
Literacy. Ah, yeah. Okay. I got it now. Thank you.
Yeah. So the different forms of literacies, from communication and information,
how get more information,
digital literacies. So all those literacies basically are that we're finding in universities, staff and students, are huge barriers for stepping into open innovation.
I would say it kind of ties into the overflow of information out there. But I can tell you also, as a business opportunity for someone, there's a huge premium on anyone who can become some kind of a curator in sorting out all the crap from the good stuff and all the stuff, information out there. Yeah. Another comment in the back?
So the word I
just one word
had
first.
in mind was opportunities.
Opportunities.
But I was just wondering how you do manage the IP rights. Like, students are being innovative. Okay, they find ideas, you develop partnerships with industrials, but how do you manage the IP rights? Who's got the royalties and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Okay, well, we're actually going to touch on that in just a few moments, so we're going to hit on that. Yeah. One more over here.
So my one word is siloed, and the context for that is that I come from a social science and social policy background, and conversation's all been about tech and products and markets. So where do the social sciences fit in? Yeah,
and I would counter that. If I had more time also to speak, it seems like the people side was interesting. I would really like to get into the more holistic approach to innovation, and you need more business functions. You know that if you want to become a good entrepreneur, someone who created a business from within a business, Vice President Paul Campbell, who's now the Senior President at former at HP, now at Philips, he says that if you really want to be successful in something that can make a difference, you need to think across minimum of 3 business functions. You need to go on in something that will also include the social sciences in order to make a real impact in things. Okay, just one last one, and then we'll go on.
People.
People.
So how do you get people to? How do you help people to develop the skills for collaboration, to work with others, to prepare them for collaboration, but also helping them to find the skills to manage and facilitate collaboration as well?
I think that if the panel's okay with it, also you in the audience, the last question, let's try to take this more people-centric, because it seems there will be a lot of questions on this. And we can have this one as outset because it's about stimulating student entrepreneurs and so forth, but let's try to turn that into people as well. But going back to the first one, how can we address fears and concerns about more open forms of collaboration, tech transfer? And I'm going to start with you, Brian, but because you said something that's not really right for the camera, but you said that one of the roles in universities is something about, what did you say to me? The shitless? About the shitless thing?
Oh yeah, exactly. There's a scare I think it was scare them shitless. That was the term you were trying to elicit from.
So the role of TTOs in yours is to scare them shitless. What do you mean by that?
I'll sort of give the codicil to this because IP is important, but it's not the only game. So. And the first thing I'll say is that open innovation isn't anti-IP. I'll come back to that. But if you take IP as the only game in town, you've got it wrong. And universities, I think, sometimes grab the levers that they think they can control. And one of those is we can patent it, we can control it, we can stop disclosure. That's an easy thing we can control. And therefore, our role is to bring in a patent agent and scare everybody with a bit of scare selling about the dangers of talking to people and disclosing your IP. And that's the only thing that really matters. And of course the patent agents love that because that's their business. So, I mean, I talk often about the spectrum from connection to protection. And in the protection side of things, universities have kind of got that covered. And it is important, you know, with many innovations to get an IP protection position, particularly if you want to get some return from that, because you're not going to develop it or exploit it. It's going to be a company that does that. So if a university wants to get a return, it probably has to get a protection position on it. What they're not so good at, I think, is the connection side of it. Okay, if it's all about don't disclose, don't talk to people, how do you square that with talking to people to get the right company to partner with to develop it? And that's the tension, I think, is between protection and connection. The other side of things is, which came out through some of the discussion earlier, was that it's not all about IP. Although open innovation isn't hostile to IP protection, sometimes it's the business doesn't require that. There's a Henry Chesborough example where he talks about Microsoft in China. What would be its best strategy? Would it be to stamp on people pirating its software or to give it away? To let people pirate it. And actually the smart business model is probably to let people pirate it so that it becomes more of a standard in the way that open source is. So sometimes the smart business model might be to do something completely radical around IP, i.e. let people pirate it, i.e. not protect it. And I think that's what's missing, is the discussion around business models so that we get a smarter connection between protection and connection.
Good insights, but just building further on Microsoft, you know they have this thing called the Xbox and the Kinect, some kind of sensor thing for games, and it was very popular when it came out a few years ago. You know, it took 1 week and someone hacked the system. And any guesses on what Microsoft did 3 years ago? The first thing they did when the system was hacked, what's the first thing they did? Legal action. We're going to sue the heck out of you if you continue hacking our systems.
Lego Mindstorms, they did the same.
But you know what Microsoft is doing today in the Kinect? Just over 3 years, and shows how the industry is changing from protecting to connection. Now, today, they have a new program, started about a year ago, called the Microsoft Connect Accelerator Program, in which if someone wants to build further on the technology of the Kinect, they even have a program for that today. They're back to the connection part. They moved away from the protection, now over to the connection part. How about you, Daniel? Any insights on IP and fears and concerns? Did you see anything when you started your business on big data?
Well, first of all, I just want to echo what Brian said, which is I think actually universities do open innovation really well, and that might sound controversial, but the role of a university is not to generate IP, it's to do research and to teach people. And they collaborate with other universities, they go to workshops, they go to conferences, they're phenomenal open innovation. Yes, IP is a result of that. So, and I appreciate that the debate about how technology transfer offices should operate needs to be had. But I just want to defend universities. I think that they're very good at open innovation because their agenda is research and teaching.
And I could say results about how do you define open innovation, because the way you put it there, well, yes, it's hard to argue with that. Yeah. But if you look at how you actually use open innovation to bring better innovation to market and commercialize these things, someone would argue that universities might have some issues with doing that.
Yes, I think, again, the role of the university is not to generate necessarily IP, because then what happens is they could become patent trolls. They're not generating any products that from this IP. Yes, they might create spin-outs and things like that, but they might end up generating a load of IP that they're sitting on and then suing other people. So this debate.
But can I challenge you on that, Daniel? Because I hear this every time. It's not the role of universities to do open innovation. It's the role to teach and generate technology. But why does it sometimes sound like that's an excuse for doing the other things?
I agree.
Does it have to be an excuse?
No, I absolutely agree with that. Well, just in the same way that a company's primary role is to sell products. It's not necessarily to generate IP that other people that they can sue other people. I think universities do what they're meant to do very well, and yes, they have this other potential.
Yeah, I mean, universities. I mean, you just have to look at the history of universities. If you look at the civic universities, you know, they started often with a mission of helping industry. So the kind of value proposition for universities is very complicated. Is it about teaching? Is it about research? Or is it about innovation? At different points, it's swung, the pendulum has swung in different directions. We've got an impact agenda, which is now trying to push the needle a little bit more to actually what's your impact on wealth creation, on industry, on social innovation, and so on and so forth. And so, yes, you know, free exchange of knowledge, teaching, all of that helps innovation, and those are really important roles of universities. I think they can do that alongside enterprise and innovation. I think that can be a healthy mix. Can't be a mix where, you know, they're sitting on IP, protecting it, doing nothing to help it get into the marketplace, and then suing people. They would be trolls in that case. But there is an argument for them being part of the ecosystem and helping things get to the marketplace. Okay. And I think that's what we're
good. This is more like an exchange of views right now. I very much want to get your reflections just a few minutes. So if you have any comments or thoughts, just hold them for a little while. Because Daniel, did you have more to add? It seems like I cut you off.
No, that's all right. And when I asked our TTO officers what's their prime agenda, and they said it's to protect UCL's IP. And I said, well, the very easy thing to do is don't ever spin out a company, don't ever do anything. But of course, that's not their primary agenda. They want to try and generate revenues for the universities. My experience of spinning out a company from UCL has actually been very positive. Whilst it's a little bit bureaucratic, it's actually helped. It helped me think more in detail about what is it we're trying to achieve as a startup and things like that. And I think we need to do more of it. But my experience has actually been quite positive.
I have a question on that, because I gone back to your, what's your name? On the frustration? Yes. Yeah. Martha, so you had the one about frustration. How do you even get started? And why should I even do this one? And then I related back to something you said in your presentation, because you didn't say the system. You said individuals were really good at what you were doing there, and they're still there. Yeah. But could that be one of the things that there are perhaps too few of the right-thinking people in a system that's just plain wrong and frustrating for you to work in? Were you just lacking having the right people?
Actually, yes. But now what UCL has recognized is that they need intermediaries to help connect the academics with the technology transfer offices. And actually, that's one of my roles within UCL. I've got a sort of pseudo title as being Impact Associate, which is to help lubricate that process, and I think we're going to have more and more of these people appearing that can connect those two.
I think you need more people like yourself. Okay. So, Els, do you have any comments, reflections on this one before I give it open to the audience here?
Well, I see mostly open innovation also between companies and not only between academic institutions and corporate businesses. So we also have programs stimulating co-creation between companies. Yes. And what you see there is, in the beginning, all is nice and fine and everybody can join. And they set up their agenda and they stay rather general in how to set the climate for innovation in my company and what financing I can find or what's my ecosystem, my stakeholders. And the more they know each other, the more it gets closed, and then they don't want anybody else to join. It is some kind of reflection to go on. And at the end, of course, things have been happening. They have been creating things together. But then it is a non-disclosure agreement, and it stays... It doesn't stay open.
Yeah.
So that's the reflection of the companies that I can experience.
Thank you. Okay, so just for me, some of the things that I'm taking away from this one is from Brian saying, I really like this idea of going from protection to connection, and we've seen how industry is moving this way as well. And I also want to, for a third point, getting back to that one, what Daniel said, but people, individuals, and also people individual like yourself now being one of the intermediaries, and you say you need more like that. Those were kind of two things I'm taking away from this discussion at this point. What about you guys? Any questions? Preferably just questions to the audience or to the speakers right now, and then we'll see if we've got more time for reflexiveness. How do you say that? Reflections, yeah. We got some hands, we got some in the middle here, and we got, yeah, we'll start.
Thank you. Hi, I have a hopefully...
Can you just state who you are, where you're from?
Okay, sorry. My name is Roland Nicholas. I'm a commercialization consultant. My company is My Best Foot. The question I have really is...
My Best Foot?
mybestfoot.co.uk. It's, it's about personalized innovation process management, but don't want to get into that right now. The question that I have is in relation to the mission or the objectives of the researchers coming out of academia. Initially, it was my understanding that, well, traditionally, that the ideas or that research that they do was made for publication, so it increases the reputation of the university or institution that they're with. Now it sounds like the objective is a little bit different. It's more like gaining revenue for the institution. Is there a feeling that researchers are being forced into thinking how they can get their research commercialized?
I like that question. So, Brian, any takes on that?
Yeah, I had a little. I was reading something last night, actually, not on this subject, and it was about the whole open access kind of discussion. And if you like, that's the game. When the whole peer review process and the publication process came into being, it was to share knowledge, to improve innovation, so that people could trade off knowledge and there'd be more fluidity of knowledge. If you like, in universities, that's the lifeblood of their funding, the peer review process, citation. If you like, that's the game. That's the game that people have been playing now for a long time. And in a sense, that's what's holding back. It's the primary issue that's holding back innovation. The fact that you can only get recognized and get rewarded through getting certain publications. So all the sort of, what the internet brings to the flow of knowledge is not being exploited in academia. So that's the primary problem before you get to commercialization. And in fact, there's an argument to say that's a bigger constraint on innovation and sharing of knowledge than the commercialization process. But to answer your question directly, I don't think that necessarily is a constraint. It's quite possible to marry both of those. It's a scheduling issue. You can publish and you can share once you've protected. The protection is a publication in and of itself. But the main thing is just make sure that innovation doesn't stay on the shelf. I mean, I think for me the biggest crime is there's all this innovation bubbling up in universities, creative stuff. If it were protected and just left on the shelf and people weren't seeing through that commercialization process, that process of... Talib Nassim has a term called half-inventors, which I quite like. And that's what universities develop. They develop the half-invented. It's for the commercialization process or the innovation process, whichever model in open innovation, to take it from the half-invented to something that has some real impact on society.
So what Brian's saying here is that it seems like as if that the focus on publication and using publication to get tenure and so forth has been a hindrance to open innovation. But what we see now, to getting revenues out of that one, but we're seeing more marriage here. Just by show of hands, how many of you would agree that this focus on publications actually hindered the commercialization of innovation? Just by show of hands, how many would agree on that? About half of the room, a little less than half. But how many would you say that we've seen a merger between the two and that's a good development? I think it is. The question is, how many of you would actually say that things are changing, that you're starting to see that they're actually going to live together in a marriage, and this is going to be a good development? That's basically what you said too, Brian. You see some signs of that, right?
Yeah, well, it's twofold. One is I think there's some innovation in the publication process. Open access, I think, is a big deal. That's going to make a big deal, make a big difference. But also, the struggle is to marry the publication, the sharing of knowledge, with the application of knowledge. So you can share knowledge widely, and some of the foundational technologies have a big impact. But there are other types of technologies that if you don't give it sharp focus, you don't give somebody a commercial or a social incentive to drive it forward, it'll go nowhere. Okay. And so it's not one or the other.
Let's go to another question. And else, and the guys in the panel, if you have anything sharp to remark, just stop me. Yeah, like that.
You shouldn't have asked. I don't think they're being forced to think about impact. I think that they're asked to be made aware about their impact and to factor that into their research applications. And I think there's a difference there. Whilst academics in the UK don't necessarily want to commercialise things and things like that, what I do is I help the academics build better impact statements within their research, so at least the research council can see that there's an awareness there. I just want to add one more thing, which is if you look at the US model, I spent a lot of time in Stanford and Harvard and MIT, and what they have, quite interestingly, is they have a generation of academics that are very good academics that were able to go and start businesses, make lots of money, and then welcome back into the universities. And what you have then there is a generation of very wealthy academics that can nurture the next generation coming through, invest in them, help them understand about entrepreneurship, and we don't have that here. And hopefully in this generation we're going to create a generation of successful academic entrepreneurs that can invest in the next generation. And I think that's what we need here and to make it more successful.
Good. So I would like to, unfortunately, just move on this specific question because we had another question as well. Yeah.
It's Mariam Atakhorami. I'm industrial partnership at UCL. I just had two comments actually. One was related to for example, the Connect box that you mentioned about the Microsoft. Aren't we just looking at overgeneralizing the whole industries as well as the companies outside there? Because Microsoft or Philips, they are massive companies. They can allow some sort of the hackers coming in because that's a way that they could penetrate into the market and stay there. What are the challenges for the newcomers, like for university ideas that they want to be commercialized? How are they also going to benefit the same sort of the situation that the big companies they have? I mean, what would you see these two challenges?
A quick reply to a question like that is that also building further on Brian's from protection to connection is the mind shift that's taking place. And I think that mind shift is going to help everyone in the ecosystem, including your universities.
The barrier is much higher for the university or any other startup wanting to get into the market and commercializing.
But if the ecosystem is changing and forcing changes, everyone's going to change in order to survive and find a role in there. The barriers might be high, it might be more difficult to change within universities, but change is happening and shaking the models is happening right now, and it's going to benefit the universities in the longer run. A longer run, 5 years from now, I think we're going to see some results on this.
I mean, it's perhaps a little bit too broad, but I would bet on open versus closed every time. I mean, it was interesting, you know, whether it's, you've seen the evidence of open innovation. You know, when I first got an Android phone and everybody was laughing at me because the big thing was to have a BlackBerry or an iPhone, I just thought, well, you know, it's obvious the way this is going. It's obvious that open will be closed. And okay, there aren't very many apps on it, and it doesn't look very nice, but it's a more open ecosystem. So it will, and it has. Yeah. And I think you can apply that. Can we just
take the follow-up question, Brian? Yeah. We're already running short on time, so I'm going to push this. Yeah.
Okay. And just the second question was going back to the, again, people aspects of it. And also, if you're looking at innovation is only one part of the whole chain of the industries. So there are also the management rules that exist now, which are more classical in compared with the innovation part. It puts incentives for the people that which looks at it in the whole space. So the professor who's going to have an idea wants to be the one who's making it to the end, because then they get the tick in the box because of they are made that impact. How are we going to change that incentive that people would look into discovery, the different parts, and they get incentive for that part that they are in the whole chain?
I just want to, Nigel, may I suggest that we do another session just on people? Because the questions are good enough, they're very great questions. And if we do that someday, we can go in depth on this one, but we're going to touch a little bit about the question you have, so we can hold that for the last topic. So just one or two more reflections, quick questions on the IPR. Yes, you had your concerns. Do you have any further questions on that? Or comments, reflections?
So very quickly, not IP, but it just strikes me that you really differentiate, like isolate innovation and market, because basically the only way to bring an innovation to market is to start from the customer and start from what they need, and then to develop around, and then, I mean, it's great to have great innovations and stuff, but what's the point if it stays on the shelves? If you can't sell it, if there is no market for it. So you start from the market, you start from the customers, and then you develop the innovation around. I mean, to me, it's the best way around.
And being an entrepreneur here, Daniel, you can only agree to that, right?
Yeah, I can actually. And what we try to encourage our academics to do is to engage with industry. The academics have hundreds of intellectual challenges that they could tackle. Some of those might be useful, some of them might not. And by engaging with industry, they can get a sense for what might be applicable and what might be useful in the real world, and filter those ideas down. So that's what we encourage them to do.
Yeah, we're going to move on, and hopefully we had time to just ask these great guys some further questions during the break or the closing session. But let's go to the next question. And the methods and tools to facilitate, well, you can read yourself, so it's up there online. But I'm just getting back to you, Elsie, because 25 years of experience told you something. What is that?
Yeah, we believe strongly in physical networks. I mean, of course, I think all chambers of commerce have these networking events, but we go much further than that. We really engage people to go on 2 or 3 years journey to learn from each other. So we have these, we call it Plato learning networks, and they are in 20 people most. They are normally not competitors, and we look at all sectors. We just put them together around the theme like innovation and see what comes out of the group. So I mean, if you just set up a kind of online platform and post a question now and then, you will not have the same interaction as the group. We strongly believe in the knowledge sharing, and not the academic knowledge sharing, but the own cases to be brought forward and to work on those to come up with innovative problem-solving ideas.
It's also my experience that you really need to merge both the face-to-face and the online things. And some of the reasons you said this is very important in your experience is that online works very well as a supporting tool on doing these things, and also inspiration for face-to-face. So I think we can all relate to that, agree on this one. But else, how do we then make this happen, having both elements present in a world that's global now, in which innovation is global, where people's all over the world? You're going to have difficulties getting people to meet face-to-face. What about virtual tools, virtual communities, and so forth? Is this going to help us? Is this going to get us to the same level as face-to-face in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think so, because you can already see a shift in the culture from our 200 incubators who are mostly going through the same process, that they use much more online, and they do competitions all over globally, that the first ones, the first 25 years companies would not have the same tendency to do. So you see there's a clear mind shift on going more digital and online, but they still meet every month or every 2 weeks.
But you've seen a less need for the face-to-face meeting because the online is getting to work better and better?
No.
Not yet?
No.
Okay.
No, sorry.
But it's going to happen in the future, yes or no?
It's parallel.
In the near future?
It's parallel. I don't know.
Okay, let's start right. Brian, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, it is parallel. I mean, business is done by people, so ultimately it's about getting people together, but there are only certain things that you can do at scale. So, if you said to people, right, build a Wikipedia, get together in a room, go, it ain't going to happen. Online communities do certain things that offline communities can't do, and they supplement offline communities. So that's what we're talking about, trying to find ways of getting the intelligence out of big data, out of crowds, and matching the right people, so that when they get to sit together in the room, they're the right people talking to each other. They're complementary.
So we kind of agree that you need the both, and then how the online is going to become more important is still some doubts on that. But let me just ask you guys a question. How many of you do not have a LinkedIn profile? Damn it. I was so close and hoping this would be the first session where no one would raise their hands. I appreciate the 3 of you actually did this, but I mean, guys, if you want to be serious about what you're doing and also getting the best of both worlds, LinkedIn is one of the first places you start, and you really need a solid presence there because LinkedIn is becoming more and more relevant today. Yes?
Yeah, but I would also like to remind the audience and the panel members that, again, you know, it must be parallel to what you do in the physical world, okay? And else has also mentioned the local and the micro. Okay, they are important too. I mean, LinkedIn is a great tool, but I don't want to invest everything on it, you know?
I fully agree. I mean, you don't have the time to do so. I don't spend any time on Facebook.
I don't even enjoy it, you know? That's the problem.
That's actually okay, but you did say the most important thing, which actually says that you understand the basis of what we're talking about. It needs to work in parallel. And whether you use LinkedIn or another platform, well, it doesn't matter. But LinkedIn to me is just something that when I need to meet someone face-to-face, whenever I remember it and have the time to do so, I go in and Google them or check them on LinkedIn. Because it enables me to have a better face-to-face meeting when I've actually checked out the online profiles. Now we can have a good discussion. So
I mean, it could last for hours, you know, it could be hours, like you said. So,
but let me just cut it down to this one. I would just argue that preparation is not only something you need to do, it's also a courtesy for those you're meeting with, that you can prepare and know more about them. And I'm just saying one of the best and easiest way to do this is on LinkedIn, and would help everyone if people were on that one. I might be a bit proactive, so I'm just going to elegantly just go to the guy in the back. So we can have a discussion on that later.
So yeah, my name is Niall Smith. I'm an associate with an open innovation company called 100% Open. I think so the online is really useful for filtering a network or for finding the right information or contacts, but absolutely it comes down to personal connection and trust as to whether projects work. I think the interesting bit for me around online portals, especially working with pan-European companies or companies that have global initiatives, is the ability to get people involved in voting, so recognising ideas and surfacing ideas that have been buried under a retrogressive manager for years and years and years. So quite often people have these great things, but they can't explain it to their boss, or they haven't got it quite right, and they're not having their micro network or their local network doesn't have people that understand the solution that they're offering. And so online portals can be a great way to build those people's confidence and let them know, you're not crazy, this is a good idea.
Okay, so we kind of established, and we might disagree, but you can use LinkedIn and online communities to go in and prepare for what you're doing and actually communicate directly online. Now you're saying you can use it for voting and other things. Just to hear on the panel, what else would you use online portals and online communities for?
Just on the voting thing, I mean, that's kind of core to what we do. And you know, if you're a tech transfer professional for 20 years, you can develop a certain arrogance. VCs and angels do it as well. I know what's a winner. I know what's a... And don't talk to me, that's rubbish. And we've all got classic examples of things that pop up on TV as big successes that we laughed at. And I think the important point is when you realise, what do I know? I don't really know anything. It's much better to ask a diverse community of people. You'll get a better decision. And voting and ranking and those sorts of things are excellent online. So as you say, it can kind of take something that would have died because nobody had the guts to sort of see it was a good idea. And crowdfunding is a good example of that sort of initiative. Things that companies or VCs didn't back are now getting backed by the crowd. So I think that's a really important development.
So getting the crowd input on what's important and so forth. What about you else? What would you use them for?
Well, I was going to go back to the last person, because it also gives me frustration that people always come up with the examples of the multinationals. Right? Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the landscape, especially in Flanders and Belgium, even 95% are small SMEs. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same needs in their innovation process. Yep. So you should be there for them mostly, because the others, they will find their way on the online platforms, etc. They will set standards. They will be exemplar. It will be the examples. But we need to shake the small SMEs to do things together, and that can only be growing locally and then hopefully further. So sorry, it was not really a question to your, an answer to your question.
No, but the point you bring up is that SMEs is so important for any economy in the world that we need to of course, have some attention to them as well. So point taken, yes. Daniel?
Yeah, so I mentioned about Satalia's business model, how we apply optimization algorithms to industry, but one fundamental aspect is building a community. There's no one optimization community out there, so we're creating a website where people can come together and discuss ideas and things like that. Fortunately, with optimization and algorithms, they already are academics, so they already meet up and have coffee and do what they do. But the building the online community is absolutely fundamental to our business model, and owning that community.
So building a community,
absolutely,
and again, as Brown was into getting the crowd's wisdom.
Yeah, and I just want to there's a lady that mentioned that this is all about tech and not about social, and I think that's completely wrong. I think what we're talking about now is about building communities, so it's a huge social aspect that needs to be dealt with.
Okay. Yeah. Can I just go back to the guy, the discussion we had? I'm just curious on what's your views on how to use online communities and platforms. So would you like to share that with us? Since you might have a different perspective.
Yeah, how I've used them.
Yeah.
I mean, how I've used them. It's been a couple. I graduated in June from the University of the Arts of London, and for the last 2 years, I worked with Chris Follows, sitting next to me, and we worked on open educational resources. So that's online communities. That's primarily online. Okay. And accessible from all the students. They can create and upload the content and share it and get feedbacks and so on. But then again, on a personal level, I always feel that it's so important that the face-to-face contact with people that you cannot really forget it, not even for a second. Because then, I don't know, it happens to me at least that the sharing is a lot more intense, okay? So,
yeah, yeah, okay. So again, we're going back to the face-to-face is important, but I think we all agree on this one. I want to share just a little personal detail here. It might be a bit strange given the work I have, but I'm actually highly introvert. I'm very introvert, and I didn't do talks and things like that, but I turn on the switch, I can do these things. But what I'm learning as an introvert is that online communities works very, very well for me. That's probably why I'm such an advocate on it, because I don't have to go face-to-face all the time. And I really dread meetings and face-to-face meetings sometimes. So, and it's interesting enough because we have so many introverts out there. So in some respect, communities, online communities, are actually a blessing for introverts. Any takes on that? Yeah?
Yeah, I think evaluating participation as well is a big thing in terms of online communities, and everyone goes.
Kind of goes back to what you evaluate. Yeah.
Yeah. So for instance, to take the point that you've taken, and also the point of being on LinkedIn, but and also thinking about the idea of being a resident online and having your identity and having your practice online. I think the participation. So. You never know who's looking at what you're putting out. And I think you get that when you meet face-to-face with someone says, yeah, I read that. You don't know they've read that. But there's like an understanding there that, this information is really useful. It's being useful, but it's really hard to evaluate how useful the information is that you're putting out into these communities as well.
Yeah. Okay, I get your point there, yeah. Just a few quick comments, and Nigel, I just want you to get your microphone in 2 minutes, because you actually asked this question and you also put it in the design perspective. I just want you to share to us why you actually did it in a design perspective, so we can get some question there. So I'll get the mic to you soon, okay? Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, my name's Ivan. I'm actually I'm a bad guy. I'm an investment banker. But what I'd note, having done quite a bit of research into small businesses, is this comment about online versus offline is what we can't forget is the transaction cost of an offline engagement. And I've actually spoken to an enormous amount of small businesses, and one of the key constraints to them engaging and getting ideas and collaborating is the cost of collaborating. And when you're in a shop and you've got two people and someone's sick, if you shut the door, you lose revenue. And that's the same in many, many small businesses. And I think the beauty of what I see, and actually a venture I'm working on, is in relation to how is it you can use both to cut the transaction cost. Collaboration is almost entirely about reducing transaction costs and optimizing the impact of engagement. And I think what technology allows us to do is to kind of flatten that transaction cost very, very significantly, and then make the offline engagement so much more productive. So what it means is that small business all of a sudden the difference between a small business person competing with a big business person is much, much different. And I think that's the most important thing.
I actually think that's a very, very good point you bring up. Brian, very quick remark.
I totally agree with that. It's all about transaction costs. That's the reason you have big institutions, because it was too costly to contract and work with everybody. Internet changes all of that. If you standardise contracts, if you standardise the way that you work with people and you make it relevant when you meet people, and you introduce some skin in the game. So one of the things we do in particular is to make sure that if we're contracting with somebody, there's some shared risk, there's some equity share or something like that. All of those things reduce the cost of the process, and they make that those multiple collaborations doable. Otherwise, it was just too messy, it was too complicated. Why bother? Just build an organisation.
Transaction costs is a good point. I mean, bring that one. But Nigel, can you just get the mic? Why did you actually bring this one up, and also in relationship to design?
And the reason why I brought this question up was a perception that I had from the involvement I've had with a number of projects, is that the difference between those that have been successful and unsuccessful has been the extent to which they've focused on the platform rather than the engagement. And I have been conscious of a graveyard of platforms sitting there not used by anybody. So I thought that was an issue that I thought was relevant to raise today. And I think my perceptions have been backed up by the comments that have been made.
Especially by those by else, because what I see is that perhaps we need to get back, and also your point, get back to engagement, real engagement, rather than just meeting more superficially on the Me Too sites of Facebook and LinkedIn and so forth. Yeah, so a good point. Anything to add on that?
I'm not against platforms.
Me neither.
Please don't get me wrong, but I've been in a former life. I was administrator of communities of interest, and I never knew a community of interest that was running good, except when the people have met at least once.
Good point.
So or you meet and then you continue on a platform, or you screen, you get interesting profiles, you meet and you go on. I mean, that's the way I perceive.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So is the person? Yeah, just a quick one.
Academics and industry, there's also the institutional perspective, and that is the university itself. And a lot of these relationships that academics have with industry are very personal. Mm-hmm. But the university's interest is their brand, their reputation. There's also a lot of pressure from policymakers for universities to interact more with industry. So can I have some sort of perspectives and views from the panel and perhaps around the room around how universities at an institutional level manage the diversity of those relationships and the communities that exist? So some, for example, have introduced, sort of customer relationship management type, CRM type systems, much to the anger of many academics who don't want their contacts taken away from them.
It's actually a great question, but we're running out of time, so can we get the quick remarks on this one? And if anyone having a good case on this in the audience, please raise your hand as well, because it's a good question. But very quickly, Daniel?
Yeah, I actually teach software engineering to some students, and I'm getting them to help design UCL CRM. And one of the requirements is to capture these issues, which are absolutely right. Academics are very protective about their relationships, but again, if you have intermediaries that, like me, that the academics trust with those relationships, then that's how you can start to...
I mean, I'll be simple, it won't work. I've seen enough initiatives to impose CRM on the academic community, and they hate it. They see this as their assets. It's a convenient place to work. They're not part of the corporate structure. So it's got to go social. Social CRM might work, but if the centre thinks it's going to own the data and everybody's going to contribute upwards, it'll fail, and you've seen that fail in university after university.
Yep, totally agree.
Else, anything to add? Or audience, anything to add on that one? Yep.
I'm Tanya Boardman from Kingston University, and I think everything you say is right. I work in a central department, which is automatically seen as bad. And I just try and get around it by really helping make things happen and take the relationships on. And really, I'm not about stealing their contacts. They're going to keep their contacts, whatever. But helping them develop that relationship and supporting them in making things happen despite everything else that goes on. But, yeah, it's a tricky one.
But do you have any, can you mention any successful case someone has done that transformation that Daniel started on and Brian says about social CRM? Any real cases that worked on this one? No, not yet. Okay, good. Lucy Gower, are you still here? Yeah, Lucy, you wrote an interesting tweet that more freelancers than employees by 2020, economy to flourish through online platforms. What do you mean by that? Yeah. About an hour ago, so hour and a half. Yeah. But you've seen, I can't buy it, we're going to see more freelancers by 2020. But how will online platforms help?
If you don't have online platforms, how are you going to organise that community? That's kind of a central issue for me. It's the only way that you're going to get the face-to-face is to organise those free agents who are all over the place through some kind of...
But free, not the free agent community, but those free agents perhaps enabling their own businesses within their given area as well. So you might have the free agent community, but what about themselves? But Lucy, back to you.
So this was a quote from earlier that somebody said, and there's a couple of things around that, is that I see that I'm a freelancer and I see that happening already, that I work with a whole range of networks, including 100% open at the back, hello. But where did those stats and those figures come from? I can see that.
They came from Google.
I
think it actually was US study. It's not a global study. It was for the US. But to be honest, every talk that I do now, I ask how many freelancers are in the room, and there's more and more and more. So it seems like everybody's a freelancer in London. No, there's a lot of people in suits today. So I thought maybe perhaps not in this case.
And from a client perspective, it will bring a project group or a network of people together
Yeah.
who are experts,
Yeah.
which adds much greater
Yeah.
value than having a project team that is employed.
And what I was trying to explain about getting a universal measure was there are people that are very good at promoting themselves, but might not necessarily be the best people for the job. And if we can get some sort of measure on their expertise, then that would be help us identify them.
I agree, and how we source our networks is through personal connections
Yeah.
and personal
Indeed.
recommendations. So I guess that's turning those personal connections into an online
Indeed.
platform. But given how important people are, and the platform is just an enabler, I'm not seeing how that, I don't understand how that would actually, in my world anyway.
We're raising lots of interesting questions here, but I want to shut it down and go to the next one just by saying that also some of the answers to this one goes, what's our banker's name? Ivan, right. I think his idea or his remarks about transactional costs, bringing those down, are very important here, because how else can you make it happen? But I don't think that what I like, the guy who challenged me a little, first one, we also need the engagement, the relationships on board. And it's not just about transactional costs, it's also about having the genuine relationships on. So very good comments to this session. We only have about 10 minutes, so, and this is the people thing that we kind of get a little bit into. But I want to start with you, Els. You actually mentioned a long list of initiatives that you have at Voka in Gent about what you're doing there. But what is the most successful for you to stimulate student entrepreneurship activities, and why?
I don't know if it exists here, but all of the academic institutions in Ghent have started with a statute, a special statute for students who want to be a student entrepreneur, so they can skip classes and postpone exams, etc. But we have now gathered those because they are, you know, they exist, but they don't know of each other's existence. In the Ghentrepreneurs, like Ghent and entrepreneurs, so it's Ghentrepreneurs, and they get to meet again a lot, because we want to get the maximum out of these starting students. There are a lot of students who want to start without even an idea, so they just join a group that has an idea that they can find themselves in. So it's very organic.
So it's organic, yeah. About back to your face-to-face and meetings. But just to challenge you a bit this one, because in Denmark we talked about you need to be born global from the beginning on. That yes, you meet locally, but you're global from day one. Would you not be at risk of having a too small focus if it's all about this, getting these together in these rooms, all the locals ones? How do you expand the mindset internationally?
Oh, well, they get that.
How do they get the interactions internationally then? What kind of initiatives do you have for that?
We have, in fact, another group called Born Global.
Okay. Yeah.
which then looks at these student entrepreneurs and looks at the ones who have the immediate potential to go international. And we get them on board as well. So we have 15 of them in another group that we are stimulating to go as fast and as far as possible.
So good compliment.
So it's again
The balance, yeah.
The balance.
But just on Daniel, I really enjoy going to Silicon Valley and visiting some place. You've been also been Boston a lot, but the weather's just better in Silicon Valley, and the people are more open. But I would bet you that you would say that those trips you took there has been most important, one of the most important things you did in order to become a student entrepreneur, now a true entrepreneur. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely cultural differences that I could talk about for hours and hours, but can I answer a different question?
Sure.
Which is just coming back to what Brian mentioned about validating before starting the process of businesses and things like that. The reason why these online platforms are great is because it can allow anybody, whether you're a student, whether you're 8 years old, to solve problems. If you can solve that problem, then you've sort of validated your idea, your skills, and then you can start thinking about spinning it out or things like that. So that's why I think these competition platforms are actually quite useful. Mm-hmm. And the more competition platforms are, the more students can engage and validate their ideas.
But you talked about cultural differences.
Yes.
How important would you see cultural differences, getting that into play? Would that be in order to create better entrepreneurs?
I have an entire spiel about networking and dating cultures between the US and the UK, but I think that what they do in the US very well is networking, connecting, meeting people and sharing ideas. And I think if we did that better here, we'd be better at entrepreneurship. Okay. Again, that probably doesn't answer your question.
No, but it's okay for that. Yeah, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, just to riff on that a little bit, it's about filter failure. If in universities...
About what?
Filter failure. If we struggle to deal with the amount of innovation that comes out of the academic community, it's even worse for the students. There's more of them. It's more variable. There's more stuff coming at us, and we just can't handle it at all. So a lot of universities don't even bother. Some of this online stuff completely changes that. It changes it in terms of validating the ideas early, so you know actually there's something here to work with, and it changes in terms of getting some resource into it. A lot of the student ideas tend to be more easily understood. They're not as complex as some of the academic inventions, so they lend themselves to things like crowdfunding already. So mix a little bit of that voting and validation process with the funding process, and you can make a lot of these student enterprises that just would have gone nowhere really flourish.
But what I'm also saying when you say the crowdfunding and the sharing and things like that, I mean, you can do that intra-campus, but you can also do that among students from different campuses as well. Yeah. So do we have enough intra-universities activities going on in which UCL is speaking with Philadelphia University and so forth? You say no more?
I've worked in 6 universities, and the first thing you notice as a tech transfer professional is you move from one institution to, I don't anymore have my own company, but when you go to another university, you spot a project that looks like another project that you used to try and commercialize that failed five years ago. And they're still ploughing that furrow because they don't know that somebody else has got something either complementary or they tried it and it failed. There's a real lack of hooking up and sharing innovation.
So more transparency within the TTOs would also help stimulate the better student entrepreneurship activities. Okay, we had some comments down here, yes?
I just want to add that the TTOs are not usually able to get access to student IP. It's usually students that own their IP. So TTOs typically are only interested in research and IP that's generated from research.
But would you say that you would get better outcomes for both ends if they were better aligned with each other?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the students now are taking the IP that the academics are generating and turn them into apps and things like that. And so actually the IP is leaking out of the universities via the students, which is a bit of a problem, but I guess it's a good problem to have.
Okay, yes. Where are you from?
Caroline Ingram, and I work for JISC, which is, well, I guess we have a new strapline, which is something along the lines of technology and education charity. And what we've done over the last few years, I manage a business and community engagement team, I should say. And what we've done over the last few years is we've funded quite a lot of activity around open innovation and looking at different models. And we've done this now across 19 different universities. And there is no one model that really works. But one particular project that jumped to mind when you were just having this discussion was one that I think overall, in the latest phase, we would say that was those of us who managed it, and also we had some critical friends, Nigel was one of those, within these projects, had failed in a lot of ways. It hadn't actually achieved its goals, at least not as far as we wanted it to. However, what they did do, which I think really relates to this, was they came up with a really good method for encouraging people to become mentors to students who could actually take them through the process of entrepreneurship and actually encourage them into being better entrepreneurs, into being able to sell their ideas and market their ideas and actually take their ideas from an idea into something which could be taken
But what I'm starting to hear now is from you and from others here, being able to actually share insights in a better way. That would be something that could really help on this one. We have some other comments first over here and also in the front and a few in the back. Can we do quick comments now, please? Because I don't mind staying here for a little longer, but I need to respect some of you probably want to go at time. So, yes? $200 what? Patents. Patents, yeah. Alone by the university, owned by the university. But the 4 times more or 5 times more, almost 1,000 is filed together with Kyoto University and the industry. So collaboration between the industry and the university is creating much more kind of IPR. So one of the good IPR creation methods is to collaborate with the research and the market. So what one say is that collaboration feeds more patents, feeds more business, and we just need to figure out how to get the students involved in this as well. Yes? We had one in the front here. So.
Sorry, can we just change the batteries on the microphone?
Yeah, can we have your question first? So, yeah.
Hi, Phil Parker from BeCreative.eu. It's just to take a parallel from the creative industries, which is where I've worked for the last 20 years, in universities and outside. We generate thousands of pieces of IP, millions of pieces of IP all the time, and it goes straight out into the marketplace. And the difficulty that we've now brought together, and listening to this is quite extraordinary, because we've just built a website, and people are saying, well, it's difficult to get people to collaborate across universities. We've got 20 mentors signed up from like 15 universities in a space of weeks because of and they're just coming on to mentor students in spaces that are then linked to an online incubator site to cut the transactional costs that the banker was talking about. And it's because, it's like, we've just done this. And this conversation seems to be sort of like locked into some tech thing that you don't seem to be looking at other parts of the world where IP has been exploited and teams have been built and the technology is moving on,
But it kind of goes back to one of the other things we talked about, that getting more transparency of what's already out there, because then we can learn of some experiences that you're sharing right here. But it seems like that sharing of experiences doesn't really work that well. How do we improve that?
I agree with that. I mean, one of my great big bugbears is that, my industries as a whole are taking a word from the back, they're siloed. So at the moment, we've got global companies that are completely ossifying, and collapsing around us, which is why we built the new website, because we need to move on.
Yeah. Just one more over here. I'm sorry, that's going to be the last one for today. So who wants the last one? Yeah, we'll take the one up there. Sorry, Richard, you missed it.
Just as a build on this topic, I heard recently that on eBay and Amazon, the biggest search terms in America are business and marketing. The biggest search terms in the UK are cooking and home decoration.
Well, I think the Americans need to get their priorities straight, right? Go, Jamie! So, okay. I think that I just want to hear, can I just have your question again, the woman in the red shirt, about the people, because I just want to get that one more time.
So for me, the question for me was that how do we look at the whole process, not only innovation, because I'm talking only about innovation, and there the people have a different incentive.
So the whole process and the people role in that?
Rolling in that.
Okay.
How would you have the incentive in different parts of that innovation process? And for example, if you have an idea, you come bring it to become a product. From that idea to production, you need different type of people, obviously, that's we discussed. But when the system is incentivized as a whole, for example, a professor to become entrepreneur and bring that idea to the end, that professor might not be the right person to bring it up to the end, but the system intensifies him to bring it from beginning to the end. How do we change the incentives? How do we change that for the people? I think that's a challenge that I think it is.
I just wanted to get that back up here. Just curiosity, and unfortunately I do not have the online voting system right here, but I can have you guys raise your hand in an old analog fashion. How many of you would be interested in a session to look more on the people sides of the issues we discussed today? Good interest, okay. Dear panel members, do you have one quick concluding remark? I'm pretty sure you have one.
Yeah. Controversial. I don't think it's just about people. It's about, we were talking earlier about competency of individuals and competency of teams. I think it's about the competency of the network. When things get too complicated, you need a network to fill all the gaps, all the skills gaps. And so I think that's the biggest, easiest thing that you can change, basically.
So I'm going to write a bit about that. It can inspire me because it's personal competences can go to team competence, can go to network competence. And the same about personal branding can go from personal branding to team branding to ecosystem branding. So how do we look into these issues? Any quick concluding remarks, or just want to say hi to everyone? Last chance you got.
I think there's a quote, a definition of innovation that's attributed to Jobs or Gates, which is innovation is creativity that ships. Traditionally, universities have been very good at creating things, and industry is very good at shipping them. The most important word in that definition is that, which is the process of taking ideas, taking creations, and getting them to market, and that's why innovation is hard.
Just building on that one, I was also saying about that it's about creative deconstruction. I think we're going to see a lot of that in coming years. I really appreciate being here and an active audience like that. I hope you got some value out of this. And if there's any question comes to me, shoot me an email. I think you can contact the speaker as well. We're going to be here for a little while further. But Nigel, you want to just say what? Thank you for
I just wanted to say
Let's give a big hand to Nigel for organizing this. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming. Hopefully you got food for thought, which was the objective of today, and thanks for contributing. Thanks very much to Stefan, all the speakers. I think it's been a really interesting program, and I've really enjoyed it myself. Thanks also to Nadia and Seema for doing the microphones, because they've been charging up and down the stairs. Final point, if anybody misread the L for an I and the hashtag, I apologise for anything you might have seen. Those of you who tried that. Apologise for any distress it might have caused. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we'll be around for a while outside. Thank you.